When we look at keelboat racing, also very interesting kind of dynamic that's popped up over the last few years. So we look at the RNYC, who used to have a gigantic fleet. Those numbers have been dwindling anecdotally, of course, over the last couple of years, but they've been dwindling with a lot of effort going into running the races. We put a whole lot of time into race management and organization. And so the question is, if we're trying really hard to put out this great racing program and the boats aren't showing up, is it their fault? Or is it our fault or organizers? And I say fault, poor choice of words, but the fact of the matter remains that we're trying really hard to get boats on the water and it's not necessarily happening. Now, if we look at race management and who's doing what, we often try to take many, many jobs and put them into one volunteer job. So you end up as the regatta chair, so the person ultimately responsible for organizing the event and dealing with stakeholders and commodores and doing all those things, and honk horns, wave flags, and capture times. It's way too much for one person. So the question is, are you running races, or are you making sure that the right people are there so that they can run the race? And that's a very different approach. But at the moment, we don't have a communications channel to speak to the racers. We have the RNYC Facebook page. It's not ideal because you're trying to promote, pool fundraisers or whatever else. So, the person running the race on a Wednesday night making a post saying the start's in 50 minutes, are you going to get any traction out of that? Probably not. If we look at the communications tactic used by Mr. Pallard last year, it was mostly email driven. Email's fine, but it's not easy to have meaningful dialogue with anyone in the fleet that way. You're going to message the 9 boat owners that are on your radar, but you don't have access to the crews, you don't have access to kind of anyone else. It's really difficult to even reschedule a race. So we see weather delays all the time. If we want to shift Squid Fest from Saturday to Sunday, because there's a big blow coming down, how do we tell the 100 people, if we include crews and volunteers and people barbecuing, that we're pushing that out by a day? Right now we don't have a mechanism for that. So the question predominantly to you, Mark, is does it make sense to kind of roll with the model that we used for Terra Nova Yacht Club last year, where we essentially brought you on as a class association? So when I say class association, it was essentially a group of racers. That was the meaning, that was the premise behind the membership. We took in the 9 and said, we're gonna run a race for you, we're gonna help you out with that. But beyond that, we didn't come back to Terra Nova Yacht Club to, help you with your bylaws or whatever else it was that you needed, because you only paid us for 9 boats out of the 150. You didn't fully buy into the Sail Canada structure, to the SailNL structure. But on the flip side, everyone was happy last year. I think you got the value out of that weekend that you put in the $22 a head or whatever the case may be. So do we take that and do we look at running that at the RNYC, and do we create a class association with a Facebook group or whatever else the communications channel is to just say, are you interested in racing? Cool. Please go to this group. Now in that way, Ken, you have a quick way of talking to the 150 people who may show up for race week, or the 100 people who may show up for Squid Fest. It's a whole lot easier to kind of deal with people on that level, and within that, it'd make your job a whole lot easier. So that's the idea. Is I don't like leaning on Facebook as the only communications tool, but right now it's probably the most efficient that we have today, just as far as getting stuff done. So I asked the question, do we look at a class association model within the RNYC and within the Terra Nova Yacht Club as you are set up right now, and just kind of look at these 20 boats. How do we help these 20 boats? And then within that, we can start telling the story of, I had a really great time on Wednesday, or I had a really great time at Squid Fest. Look at these pictures, we can actually put together a narrative. So it's one and the same. It's quick to easy to organize, and we actually have something that we can push out afterwards. That's kind of the goal there. And if we do have 10 dedicated boats who want to go racing on a Wednesday, and they do have a communications network, can they start to self-organize a little bit more? All of a sudden, we don't need Ken, or we don't need you to plan a start on a Wednesday. We can pull from within the fleet to say, hey, I've got nobody tonight. Can someone pop down and put off a start? That's an easy ask on Facebook on a Tuesday setting up for Wednesday versus sending out an email to the boat owner saying, hey, do you have any crew that aren't showing up tomorrow night who want to run a race? It's an impossible communications channel, whereas if we flip to social, all of a sudden it's a bit easier. That's kind of the idea. Now with this, we would continue to do exactly what Pete described a few minutes ago in the form of race management support. So we look at race chair and principal race officer as two very different things. We need someone who can network, we need someone who can find berths for people to come in, and you also need someone with the technical ability to set a race course and to run a fair race and do all those things. You don't need that level of support on Wednesday, but you might want it for Squid Fest or for Port Authority or for Race Week or whatever the case may be. So you don't need us for everything. We can train someone pretty quickly to figure out how to start a race and how to report times. That we can do in an afternoon. So you can have Pete and I kind of showing up for the major events and work with your most dedicated local volunteer to build their race management skills so that all of a sudden you see autonomy start to come up the other side. That's kind of where we envision this going. Now I say this, I'm not doing this, right? Like I'm not going to go to every club and set up a Facebook group for the racers. I simply can't do it. So with this strategic vision, I'm literally asking the question, and not directly at this moment, but is this something that you think you can do? Is this something of value? And if so, cool, let's do it together and figure out the best way to roll it out. And if it doesn't work out the way that we want to, fine, we'll have a lesson learned and we can kind of shift gears this time next year and try something else in 2020 if that's what it comes to. That's the idea, is let's start treating the smaller groups of interested sailors as the small groups that they are and give them a voice. And on the flip side, give us a communication channel to talk to them. Sorry.